Are you on? I don't think you're on.
Balcony.
Oh, okay, yeah. I don't know. It keeps coming back to the Playboy Bunny scene, I guess. But I want to defend that scene a little bit because I was sitting with Ali during this movie, and one of the things that I was noticing was what you were talking about, David, about spectacle. I think that's really conscious all the way through this movie in the way that the American society is addicted to spectacle and takes its spectacle with it, takes its entertainment with it, and cannot see life as it is without thinking about it in terms of entertainment. And that scene plays into it, you know, just like the USO show in the jungle and the first introduction of Kurtz. You know, it's a reel-to-reel tape. It's like they're having a record listening party. You know, I mean, and playing the Wagner when they're attacking the village and everything else. And for me, Chief, looking at that Playboy bunny, he's in there with a Playboy bunny, and he can't get it up for her unless he makes her look exactly like the centerfold.
Image. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like meeting a star. Like, that's what it's about. That's the excitement for him. It's not the fact that there's a real live woman here in the war zone with him. It's really pathetic. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Thank you. That's good, Matt. Any more?
Center.
Okay. Which center?
So, is it? I think it's. I don't know who it's
Who's
gonna
got
go
the mic
to.
is the question. There's the mic.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. This would be my first time seeing Redux, and I really did not like it, really at all. And it was.
That's compared to the earlier version, or just
yeah.
as a movie
Compared to the
itself?
earlier version, the earlier version is up there with one of my favorite movies of all time, and just the experiences between the two movies was really different and really surprising. Because I remember the first time I saw Apocalypse Now, I remember feeling so overwhelmed and engulfed by this nightmare, like by a nightmare of war and Martin Sheen's experience in this war, and how powerful that really was. And then I went from that movie stayed with me for at least the next 3 weeks, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And then I was watching Redux. I was really waiting for it to be over, and it's just because of the pointless scenes. Like, in my opinion, the Playboy scenes served no purpose to anything, and the French dinner served no purpose to anything. So when it got to some of the later great scenes, I was already kind of done with the film, wanting it to be over. I was tired. I wanted to get up, so I couldn't really focus on it. So I was really disappointed by Redux.
Maybe I should ask the panel, turn it around and say, what do you think about, I mean, this is his final statement. I mean, this is the way he wants it to be, right? So is that right, or is it just another version?
Well, I think it is just another version. I mean, trust the art, not the artist, you know. I mean, I trust the original version. These guys are always saying, Spielberg has done it with E.T., and, Lucas has obviously done it with the Star Wars. And, okay, there might be very talented filmmakers, but they're also whimsical human beings, and they might have different ideas about their films. And this is not necessarily something that you should take on face value. I mean, it is the early version.
But we do have, in the other arts, we have plenty of examples of artists who revisit their early work, recast it, and those later versions have the same stature, maybe more even. We think of Henry James rewriting his novels for the New York edition. They both exist. I mean, maybe that's the difference, because with film, maybe Redux drives out the earlier version, whereas if we had equal access to both, we could say, well, we just have two versions.
Yeah, like a lot of first-rate directors, you look at what Coppola did in terms of recutting the Godfather saga for television, when he basically sequentialized everything, essentially took out the flashback structure. That's a significant change, and I thought it did in fact diminish a hell of
Put new material in too.
Yeah, a hell of a thing. Smaller version, Spielberg at the end of Close Encounters, which I think is probably his, one of his 3 or 4 best pictures. This impulse to, it's an honest, artistic, and entertainer's impulse. I want to show them what's inside that ship. And it's in a funny way, it's the more middlebrow parallel to, in the French plantation scene, we're going to talk politics, goddammit. And in a way, the film could, in theory, and should support it at that point. It might be a good time to kind of hear it. it doesn't work. And you just never know. And
I'll refrain from asking you folks about the many versions of Blade Runner, because that'll keep us here all night.
Yeah. Well, talking about Blade Runner, I think one thing I wanted to mention the soundtrack. Doesn't the film always have a very proto-80s Vangelis kind of soundtrack?
I noticed that tonight.
The 80s, you know, like anticipating the kind of the Scarface soundtrack and the Blade Runner soundtrack. It's ahead of its time at that time, you know. It's bizarre, and it's in complete contrast with the rock and roll soundtrack.
Yes, please. The man in the suit? Yes. Okay.
I found it interesting the way you're talking about before the movie about the editor adjusting all the sound levels so the mosquitoes are at the proper sound levels in relation to the rest of the movie. Well, that's just an example of the editor working out all the bugs.
Is that our last question?
Balcony.
Tell me this is not our last question.
Balcony.
David, sorry.
Yes, please.
No. Sorry, just before that, I think it was you talking about about how long it was. I think if this film needed an intermission, I think that's. I mean, you know, when the French plantation sequence started, I went, right, okay, it's time. It's a good time to go to the gents now, and most of these long films do require an intermission. I think you might feel otherwise. You might feel differently about the film if you saw it with an intermission.
Shall we make the one in the balcony our last? We said someone was in the balcony. Is that right?
Sure, yeah. So not to bring everything back to that Playboy bunny scene,
yes.
but since most panels have been very congenial, it's an interesting point of conflict. This is my first time seeing the movie, period. So I guessed that the French scene was probably new in this movie, but I didn't guess the Playboy scene. And I completely disagree with the women being shown as being ditzy, because if you look at that scene, I agree with the gentleman down there that the men are relating to the women completely differently. And the women, in a way, are soldiers in their own way, if you will, of the sex industry. And if you listen to what they're saying, they're actually trying to assert themselves and their experience in their own way when they're not actually soldiers in the context of the movie or the other characters. And, you know, granted, it's not as strong or intellectualized, but if you take the characters for where they are, I think it's making a very feminist point and doing it very, well, I was surprised by the elegance at which it's doing it.
I see your point. In fact, I would agree with that on one of the two women, because she talks about how she was being asked to pose in ways that repulsed her. I'm not so sure about the bird lady, but maybe we have to split the difference. Is that it, folks? Ready to go home and sleep some? Okay. Well, thanks for staying.